Hi players, Dzień dobry from Wrocław. My name is Asaf and welcome to my channel Easy Board Games. Today we're going to have a preview for Hood Troubles in Sherwood that is published by Phalanx Games. This is a live campaign right now on GameFound. And before we're diving in, I just want to tell you that this is a prototype that was sent to me by Phalanx Games. So everything that we see is a subject for a change, like the art, the rules, the components, and so on. So let's check out the table and see what Hood is all about. Hood is a strategy game for 2 to 8 players, don't worry, we'll get to it a little bit later, where each player will assume the role of someone from the legend of Robin Hood. Here what you can see right now is a setup for 2 players. I have over here Robin Hood, and on the other side I have the Bishop of Hereford. So we have 2 factions, but in the prototype we have up to 4 players. The other 2 are of course the French Nobility and the Sheriff of Notingham. Now, in a game of Hood, starting from the randomly chosen player and going clockwise, each faction will have their turn, which consists of 5 main phases. The first one is the start of your turn. That means that if you have certain effects, like what we can see over here, for example, with this icon, then you will be able to execute those actions. Then we're going to move on to the second part, that is taking the actions. And already here we're starting to see the asymmetrical aspect of this game, because the actions that each faction will be able to take is pretty much different. Even though movement is probably the only thing that is mutual for all of these factions, still even doing something like trade is going to be different from one faction to another. And of course, there are different actions that one faction will be able to take and others will not be able to do so. After we finished with that, we're going to move on to something that's called the development, and that is something that even more contributes to the asymmetrical aspect of the game, because here each faction again will bring something else to the table. For example, for Robin Hood it will be something that is called Give to the Poor, and for the Bishop it's going to be something else that is called Construction, that basically the way of the church to start building the different buildings that they have onto the main board. After that, we'll have something that is called ransom, which is basically taking money from your own private treasury and placing it in one of these ransom sacks. Don't worry, we'll cover it in a few more seconds when we'll talk about victory conditions over here. And after that, we're going to have the income phase. And again, sometimes it's going to be different between the factions. Now, again, I remind you that here I'm having only 4 factions, but already in the campaign page, I think that you can see that they have revealed, at least if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 more factions. So that is something that is definitely worth checking out. After that player finished taking their turn, we're going to move clockwise to the next player, and this is how it's going to continue. After a player has reached or passed, of course, 25 victory points, then we're going to finish the round until we completed it. And at the end of that round, the player that has the most victory points is going to be the winner. And if we have players that are tied, then they're going to share the victory. Now, victory points can be achieved in 3 ways. It's a little bit funny to say it because the first main way is, of course, shared for everyone, and that is in winning combats. The second way to achieve victory is from these ransom bags. So basically, every time that collectively all the players have enough gold according to the player count, that means that if we're playing at 4 players, then 16 gold, but again in all of the players' ransom bags, then we're going to trigger something that is called the King Richard's phase, that players are going to score victory points according to how much money they have in these ransom bags. And the third way to score victory points is basically different from each faction to another. So while Robin Hood has one way to score victory points with their faction, the Bishop or the Sheriff of Notingham or the French Nobility are going to have their ways to score victory points. Now, this was a very brief overview, of course, of Hood Troubles in Sherwood. Now, even though this is a preview and I don't have a ton of experience with this game, I still would like to tell you a few general initial thoughts, but still bear in mind and take everything with a grain of salt, again, because this is a prototype, and also, again, I don't have a lot of experience with this game, so it's going to be a little bit on the surface and on the surface alone. Hopefully, if at some point I'm going to have a copy of the final product of Hood, then I will be able to actually go deeper than that and play more games in different player counts and then actually give you the thoughts that I have. So let's talk about the basic things that I like in this game, and starting of course with I think what is the most obvious, and that is the asymmetrical aspect. I think that it's very cool of course to have asymmetrical factions that are going to play completely different. I'm going to circle back to it a little bit later. I think that you can already understand why, but in general, I think that it's very pleasing to know that factions are going to play differently for mainly two reasons. First of all, the replayability, which is something that is, of course, as board games is very important for us. Every time you'll be able to play a different faction, and that is, of course, going to give you a different experience and a different aspect to look at the game. To counter that point, because you have a game that is so asymmetrical, that is going to be, in my opinion, a little bit more difficult to teach this game. So I think we had this problem in other games. I think it's very obvious, and I've heard already a few other content creators and in general in the comments of the project on GameFound that are comparing this game to Root. Sure, I understand why. First of all, yeah, it kind of even, I don't want to say looks the same, but give a little bit maybe the same vibes, right? With these roads between the different locations that we have, pretty similar to Root, of course. But at the same time, because the victory condition here is the same, it's shared for everyone, right? You just need to pass the 25 victory points, and you need to have the most victory points when someone is triggering the end of the game. And I think this is going to be the main difference, because while you need to teach each and every player about their own faction, which again makes this game a little bit more complex, at least for the person who usually teaches the game in the group, still you have the main idea of how winning the game. And also, this is another way why I wouldn't be so rushed to compare it actually to Root, and maybe not even compare it to other games, because there are a ton of games that are very asymmetrical but have the same winning condition as the others. The first example that just jumps to my head is Tsukuyomi Full Moon Down, and there again we have factions that are playing completely different than one another, and but at the end of the day, the goal of the game is the same, and that is just to have as many victory points as possible. You don't have different winning conditions, and I think this is what separates Root from all the other games, even though we have games like Root as well. In any case, going back to talk about Hood, so even though it's a little bit more difficult to teach every player about their own faction, still the goal remains the same, and that is to have the more victory points, which I think makes it easier than other games to actually teach. Now, the rules in the game are relatively simple. You have your turn, you're performing these actions according to this order, and then the next player is going to do that. Of course, the depth of the game comes from your decisions that you're going to take, and you have a lot to cover and try and research and pull some levers before you really understand how your faction is going to work. So, do I think that you're going to unlock the full potential of the game after your first or second game? Absolutely not. And more than that, I actually think that in the beginning it will be more beneficial if you're going to have the same group that is going to play the same game with the same characters, or with the same factions, let's call it like that. But again, this is something that sometimes is a little bit hard to achieve, so just take it in consideration. Another thing that I really liked in this game, and this is something that not all the time you find, unfortunately, that is so strong in a game, and that is the theme. So the theme, if you like I'm not so sure I can say it's the IP or not, because Robin Hood is based more on like the English folklore, and more like a story, like different stories and poets and whatever, and not like one writer that decided to write, I don't know, the Adventures of Robin Hood or something like that. But the theme here is everything. The available actions that you have with your factions are very thematic. So let me give you a small example. If Robin Hood is a little bit more of like agile, jumping from one place to another on the map, you have here something that is pretty cool. So this space, like your actual player board, is actually your hideout, and you'll be able to actually jump from your hideout to different forest locations on the map, which is pretty cool. And not only that, you have like these small camps that you'll be able to build in different places. And with that, when you're actually building your camps, you'll be able to upgrade your faction. That means that in every space like this that you have, you're going to take another tile that you would like to upgrade, you're going to place it here, and this is starting to be in effect starting from now. So I find it that it's pretty cool to have so much theme, not only in the general story of the game, but actually in every almost single action that you will be able to take here, you feel the theme, which is something that I definitely really appreciate. Next, and because each faction is going to play completely different, as we've said before, then this is something that in order to understand your faction and how does it work, you're going to have some player aids. Now, that means that the table space is going to be a little bit bigger than what it seems that the game is going to require to begin with. So here, for example, this is the player aid that we're going to have for Robin. Let me show you maybe on the other camera so you'll be able to understand more the table size. But next to it, if we're looking at the bishop, for example, then we're going to have something that is a little bit bigger already. And I mean, it's not the end of the world. We have seen actually player boards that are bigger than what we're having here. What I want to say is that I heard, or at least saw, that people are saying that the game is like light to medium. I'm not so sure this is where I would have placed this game. I definitely don't think that this is a lightweight game. Again, I don't want to compare it to Root because I'm not so sure this is going to be the right comparison, but so maybe it's not going to be a super heavy game, but don't let like the cute art that you can see on the box or the meeples that you have on the board to confuse you. I definitely don't think that this is a light game, and probably more on the spectrum of like medium to medium heavy. So somewhere about that. And again, maybe the game itself is not as complex as other games, but the decisions that you will need to take here and understanding how your faction works and understanding how your faction works in comparison to your opponents, to which other actually factions are working, because not every game is going to be a 4-player game with the factions that you know with the base game. And not only that, we're going to talk about the campaign page in just one more moment, but you already have like the 5th player expansion, so you need really to understand who is in front of you. And this is why I think that this game is heavier than what it seems to be in the beginning. So take it into consideration. Again, this is, I want to remind you guys, this is just my very shallow point of view of the game. I didn't dive too much into Hood, so everything that I'm talking about, take it with a grain of salt. Now, in the campaign page on GameFound, you can already see that we have 2 types of pledges. One of them is at €55 for the base game and one expansion of the Pirates, if I'm not mistaken, that is going to give you the 5th player expansion. And you have the gameplay all in at €95, which means the base game and 4 more expansions, which is already a lot. Now, I'm saying a lot not in terms of the price. I think that in general, these are the prices that we're receiving today in board games. I don't think that we have here something exceptional, but a lot in terms of content and factions that you'll be able to play with. Now, Phalanx do recommend that the maximum amount of players is going to be 5, and I read somewhere in the comments that more than that is going to be on your own risk, but it is possible theoretically to play up to 8 players, which is I'm not so sure this is something that I would like to do, especially because the downtime is probably going to be a little bit too much, but it is possible. 5 players also, I think it's very respectable to play on the table. So more than just the base pledge that you have for this game, it's just about the variety that you have with the expansions, and of course also the replayability. But again, you guys, the replayability here is, I don't know how much you would like every time to change completely your faction until you're really locked into how the game works with your specific faction that you already played and how the other factions are going to work as well. So I think that this is a little bit of a double-edged sword, if you say it like that, because on one hand, it's very cool to have such a high level of asymmetrical aspect, but on the other hand, it means that you need, again, like we've seen in other games, to learn not only your faction, but also the other factions as well. So if you're deciding to go for this game, make sure that you understand that this game will not reveal its full potential after 1, 2, possibly not even 3 games. This is something that you will need to dive into and really explore the different corners of Sherwood. With that, guys, thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. I hope that you learned something new or saw something that you like. Take care, and I'll see you next time.